Hello everyone, welcome to our History 101 class. Today we're going to be talking about the Lewis and Clark expedition. So in class we already talked about the Louisiana Purchase and the development of westward movement a little bit already. We're going to be looking at Lewis and Clark expedition from 1804 to 1806, and this will be a little introduction to the primary sources that were handed out in class, where you'll be asking, were Lewis and Clark respectful to Native Americans they met on their journey? So we're going to go ahead and get started here and talk a little bit about the Lewis and Clark expedition to kind of get us going here. So as we can see here on the map, at the start of the 19th century, the newly independent United States consisted of the original colonies here along the eastern seaboard, as well as most of the former British land claims east of the Mississippi. So all this area, including this Northwest Territory that we've talked about already. Now, France claimed a large expanse of land in the middle of the continent here, which they named La Louisiane. From 1699 until 1762. In 1763, France ceded or sold this land to Spain as part of a treaty ending the 7 Years' War with Britain. Now, things that we've talked about in America, you can hear some of the European results of those. Now, Louisiana included the Mississippi here, the Mississippi River, as well as the Missouri River that flows all the way up in this direction here. And it also included the port of New Orleans, which was a huge commercial center at the mouth of the Mississippi River. Now, through a treaty with Spain in 1795, the United States was allowed to export goods through New Orleans and to navigate the rest of the Mississippi. However, in 1798, Spain revoked the treaty, upsetting American merchants. Now, in 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte took Louisiana back from Spain when he became emperor. Now, the next year, Jefferson sent diplomats to Paris to negotiate the purchase of New Orleans and the surrounding areas in order to secure American control of trade in Mississippi. So they really just wanted this little area down here. Now, though Napoleon had reclaimed Louisiana in the hopes of establishing a French empire in North America, he soon abandoned his plans as France failed to defeat the Haitian Revolution and war with Britain continued. Now, the American diplomats were authorized, this is back in Paris, were authorized to pay $10 million for New Orleans and the surrounding area. They were shocked when the French offered the enormously larger territory of Louisiana for $15 million. Now, convinced that the United States would approve, the American representatives accepted the offer on April the 30th, 1803. Now, though there were some doubts over the constitutionality of the deal, which we talked about in class, Congress quickly ratified the treaty. So, though on paper Louisiana belonged to the United States, Americans had no established command and little knowledge of the purchased land. So President Jefferson ordered an expedition of 30 U.S. Army volunteers led by his aide Meriwether Lewis and soldier William Clark to explore the territory. And the objectives included exploring resources and mapping the territory, finding a route across the continent for commerce, establishing an American presence to preempt European powers from claiming it, establishing trade with Native American tribes, and emphasizing the United States' sovereignty to Native Americans. Now, the expedition lasted from May 1804 to September of 1806. They departed from St. Louis and reached the Pacific coast. Now, while the members of Lewis and Clark's expedition were the first Americans to see the western half of the continent, dozens of Native American nations had lived in the region for millennia. While there were possibly millions of indigenous people living in the present-day American West before European contact, by 1800, the population was reduced to hundreds of thousands, mostly by diseases brought by Europeans. Now, Lewis and Clark's team came into contact with nearly 50 Native American tribes during the expedition, and these nations had very diverse societies and cultures. To give a few examples, The Mandans farmed corn, beans, and squash. They lived in earth lodges and were open to trade with the United States. Breeding and herding horses was important to the Lakota, who used the animals to hunt buffalo and protect their lands from foreigners. Chinookan or Chinook tribes were coastal peoples whose staples were salmon, and they made large canoes, lived in longhouses, and had little conflict with their neighbors. The land of the Nez Perce covered millions of acres, where they lived in over 100 villages, and by contrast, the Clatsop were a small tribe composing just of 3 villages. Now, some of these tribes had been in contact with English and French traders for decades before Lewis and Clark arrived. Others may not have seen white or black people before the Corps of Discovery, but had indirectly been in contact with the relative newcomers through trade, the introduction of horses, and even diseases. So, using the primary sources that I handed out in class that are attached to this assignment here, you're going to be answering a central historical question based on the following and based on those documents. Were Lewis and Clark respectful to the Native Americans they met on their journey? So using those sources, you're going to list 3 reasons and pieces of evidence that shows how they were respectful, and 3 how they were not respectful. And when we meet in class, we're going to take some time to discuss this very important topic.